Hey, I'm John. Thanks for joining me for this video today. In this video, I'm going to finish weathering Jerry from Maschinen Krieger. Now, in the last installment of this series, I got the some of the initial streaking and panel lining done, and some chipping and things like that. The balance of this video is going to be adding fluid leaks and stains, and maybe a few more touch-ups of chipping and some reapplications of things where I want the weathering to be a little heavier. And then, of course, there's going to be the process of adding all the tubes and wires and things like that. So this one will wrap up the build of this very cool looking model. All right, the kit comes with loads of wire and springs and hoses and tubes and all sorts of nonsense. I'll admit this is my least favorite part of any Maschinen Krieger build. I love the genre. I love painting and weathering them. But if they just decided to get rid of all the hoses, I'd be completely happy with it. But anyway, the instructions show you which part to use. Yes, it's in Japanese, but I've found it's pretty easy to decipher just from the pictures alone. And they show you how much to cut for each of these in millimeters. So I'm going to have to find a metric ruler because I live in the US and we just don't have them. But I'm going to start getting the hoses on this thing and adding a little bit of paint into them, and then where those hoses are going to be great points to add leaks of various types. All right, the basic operation I'm doing for most of these hoses is I've cut the piece, and like I'm going to put one in the leg here, and I'm just going to dip the end of it in super glue. And I'm not going to be stingy about the super glue. I want this thing to stay. I don't want to be fighting with it coming loose, and I'm going to stick it up in there and then give it some time to dry. Now you may be looking at that and going, yeah, but what about that blob of super glue? Well, to quote great American philosopher Foghorn Leghorn, well, that's what weathering's for there, boy. So, I don't know that Foghorn Leghorn ever actually said that, but if he built models, he would. Anyway, I'll let that dry, and then I'm going to put another touch down here at the end of this channel, and I'm going to be much lighter with that, but I'm going to use a toothpick to put that in so that it'll stay down in that channel, and then I'm just going to use my tweezers to connect it down here up under this rim of the foot, and then around the rest of it. That's what I'm going to do, is just go through and start cutting off pieces, gluing in one end of it, because there's several that have to go on the leg parts up here, and then they connect to a corresponding hole in the I guess you'd say fuselage. So I'm going to have to do those and then screw that on and then connect those in. So it's going to be glue, then put a little glue on the other end of it and use my tweezers to get it lined up and stick it in there. I'm going to have to do almost all of this off camera though, because I can't. I was having trouble even seeing this without being right up on it without my optivisor. So anyway, that's the process I'm going through to get all these tubes in. And what I've found, if you're like me and you don't like doing it, I just find if I sit down and say, okay, this session, this is all I'm going to do. I'm just going to do tubes. And I just cut and I glue and I cut and I glue until it's all done. And I just try to not think about it and just go on autopilot. The hoses and tubes are installed. Yeah, and if I sound like it wasn't a fun process, it wasn't. It wasn't hard. It's just tedious. I kept asking myself, why? Anyway, somebody likes hoses. I used the kit supplied hoses. That's this brown material. In a few places I used lead solder just because I wanted something finer. I didn't want it all to be the same size. This lead solder, if you ever can get your hands on some, it's easy to get, really. It's very easy to work with. It doesn't hold paint real well, so you have to kind of be careful with it. They have these springs here that it was supposed to have a wire inside, but I'll be honest, I got so frustrated trying to get the wire in and the thing around it and get it all bent right that I just threw the wire away and just stuck the spring on there, and there it is. Um, I'll just leave it like that. And what I'm going to do over this brown is I'm going to do some various washes and stuff. I'm just going to leave it that color, but just put some things on there to give it some tonal variation and make it look like it's a bit greasy. I've got to put a dot of paint on the screws here that hold in the legs. I meant for that just to be kind of temporary to fit everything together, and then when I got it screwed in, I decided just to go ahead and get it in there. I screwed it in as tight as it could go, and I was without trying to break the plastic. And then once I had it in place, I ran some Tamiya extra thin cement between the join right here to lock it in place, because even when it was screwed down, it was quite easy to rotate the thing around, and I didn't want that happening. Another thing I did not anticipate, and I'm still thinking about how to address this, is this thing will go over in a heartbeat. I may just have to make some kind of lead ball of some sorts, glue together some fishing weights or something, paint them black, and just put some super glue on them and try and drop them down in here so that it gives some weight to the front. I should have thought about that. When I tested it, it seemed like it was okay, but now it's not so much. So something I've got to consider. I did a very slight modification to the gun. It's got this rather rude-looking appendage here that that is what connects it to the fuselage. And there was just a small plastic nub that fit into a hole in the fuselage, and I was worried that that wouldn't be enough of a mounting point to hold it in place. So I trimmed off the nub and drilled it out and put in a piece of paper clip right there, super glued that in, so when I put this on the model, I'll be able to put a dab of super glue on that, stick it in. Once that dries, I can then run some Tamiya extra thin to kind of melt the plastic too, so it'll join that together. I've got the snuffleupagus arm here, and it had that rubber tubing that was supposed to go around it, but I just didn't like the look of that. I've always thought that looked kind of toy-like, so I left it just in its, I guess you'd say, its natural state. I ran some wires from the various little pinchers on the end here, and I thought it would look cool to twist them together, so I just twisted that lead solder together, and it'll stick up into the front of the vehicle. And I left this unpainted so that it'll slide in there easily, but that won't be seen. It'll be covered to about right there, so that'll work good. Now what I want to do is, I've got this, I think this is a new color from Citadel. It's new to me certainly, but I think it may be a new paint. It's called Iron Warriors, and it's basically a little bit darker than Lead Belcher. It's a metallic color, but it's it's closer to a traditional gunmetal, I think, than Lead Belcher. So I just wanted to give this a try because I do like their metallic colors. So I'm going to dry brush this gun with this Iron Warriors just to make it a little bit different. I think I'm going to use a brighter color on this snuffleupagus arm here. But let me get this shook up. Actually, I stir them up. I don't shake paints ever. But let me get this stirred up, and I'll dry brush this. Since I won't be using a lot of it, I'm just going to go straight into the pot and get some of this paint out and work that into the bristles a little bit. And then I'm just going to start dry brushing it. Now I'm not going for a edge highlight dry brush. I want it to be a little more prominent than that. So this is I guess you'd say a heavy dry brush. I want it to end up with more of the silver than the black, basically. I'm definitely liking this color. It's one of my favorite things is to dry brush Lead Belcher across black, because I think it makes for a steely look. And this is doing that too. It's not substantially different from Lead Belcher. I mean, I'm not going to lie. It's it looks very close to it. I think if I were painting the two side by side, it would look different because it is darker. I mean, it's visibly darker when you look at it in the bottle. I think dry brushing it like this, because it's such high contrast, it appears much closer to lead belcher than would otherwise. But I think if, like I said, if I just painted the gun barrel with this and then compared it to lead belcher, there would be certainly a difference. But I like this color, so I will use it on some more stuff and see what I think. All right, here you can see the gun dry brushed with the Iron Warriors and the Snuffleupagus arm with lead belcher. And you can see that the lead belcher is just a little shinier, a little more silver. I like them. I think I'm gonna, unless I find a compelling reason not to, I think I'm gonna keep both of these colors in my inventory of paints, I guess you'd say. But I do like the way the Iron Warriors looks, and I think it'll be a good addition to the paints. I'll give the Snuffleupagus arm a coat of Nuln oil just to bring out some of the details and to make it look a little bit steely. On the brown hoses, I'm just going to stipple on some Citadel Agrax Earthshade. And what that'll do is just suggest slightly different coloring, make it a little splotchy. And I'll probably do a couple of applications, making it heavier in some areas than others. So it'll give it some varied color, but it's also going to matte that down a bit. I'm also going to add a little bit of this Agrax Earthshade here, just to give it a little bit of a dirty look. I'm assuming that the whole reason he has this Snuffleupagus arm is to dig around in things, pick things up. So I'll make the assumption that the end of it's going to get dirty, so that'll just give, if I can keep it on camera, that'll just give kind of a dirty look to the end of it, just a little bit of different color. All right, on this exhaust here, I'm going to stipple on some chipping brown. This is going over a neutral gray color. All right, once I've got that in place, I'm going to use some of this Vallejo Model Wash Light Rust. I'm just going to lightly brush that on. That rust wash dries very transparent, so if you use it, you may need to put on 2 or 3 coats. This one took a couple of coats. Now I'm just going to go in with some Nuln oil and drop it down into the exhaust itself, just to darken it up a bit. And I'll let that dry, and we'll call the exhaust done. Alright, as long as I've got some rust tones loaded in my palette, I'm just going to go in here to some of these larger areas of chipping and just add the barest hint, hopefully, of rusting. I'm not going to color in everything, just the larger areas and some selected chips, just to give the idea that these may be a little older and they've started to rust just a bit. It also looks good to just add a little around some of these bolts. I'm going to try something new. This Vallejo Splash Mud, it's brown splash mud from their Weathering Effects line. It's fairly thick. It doesn't have texture to it that I can tell, but it's fairly thick in terms of it doesn't flow. It just kind of sits. And I went and checked out their YouTube channel, because they have a lot of videos. If you're ever wondering how to apply any of the Vallejo products, check out their channel. But the way they showed it, you can paint it on, but the way they showed it being used was just doing the old flick like this. And it goes on much more opaque than the modeling washes that I often use for this, which is good. I thought, if this is going to, after I saw the video, I thought if this is going to give it a really splashed, muddy look, that's okay. I think it'll look cool. So I'm just going to put that on there. We're just going to see what happens. Now, they have different colors, as with most of their weathering products. So I'm already liking the way this is going on. So I'm probably going to pick up a couple of more, just so that I'll have a lighter tone and a darker one. I'm just going to get a little bit of water, see what happens if I lighten it up a little bit. I just used dirty paint cleaning water. That's why it changed the color a little bit, but that's okay. Different colored mud. Yeah, it looks like streaks, or splatters rather. That's what I'm going for. And you see how I'm doing this. I would suggest putting down a piece of paper towel or something like that, because it'll definitely mess up your work surface. So let me continue around and get all the other sides of the feet done and do it from the front. We'll take a look at how it ends up. Well, it definitely gives it a splattered mud look. I like that. I've hit it with the hairdryer. It's had a little time to dry. It's drying a bit glossy, which I guess if you're wanting wet mud, that's definitely cool. I was looking for more of a dry look, so I may have to go and hit that with a matte coat. And I was also going to experiment with maybe some different colors. I wish now I would have purchased a couple of more colors than just this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this Vallejo Model Wash, this Desert Dust color, and I'm just going to mix some of that in with this. And what it'll do is it'll give me a little bit more transparency to the splattered mud, or just give me another color. I don't think having one color of mud ever really works on a model. It needs multiple tones of mud, so I think this will help. That's my theory, so we'll see. Let me give it a test splatter there, and I'll just continue putting that over. Oh yeah, that's going to work right there. I like Tamiya and Gunza and the different oil paints and enamels that the other Spanish companies have, and those are all great and I like using them. But I really think if you told me I could only use one company's products, and that was the one I had to use and I could use nothing else, I'd use Vallejo, because their stuff, while it's entirely acrylic, I don't know of anything in their line that's not acrylic. Making some camera changes there. Sorry about that. But I don't know of anything in their line that's not acrylic. But the stuff just works. A lot of people don't like using acrylic weathering products. They say you can't do as much with it. But I've found if you adjust your technique to take advantage of what the product does and what its strengths are, you can come up with some pretty good stuff. And I like using the others, and I'll certainly continue to use them. But if you've not looked at these Vallejo acrylic weathering products, really, if you have the opportunity and the finances to do it, to just test some out, I'd really recommend doing it, because they really do work pretty doggone good. So let me finish splattering this mud around here. I may add a couple more tones and stop being a commercial for Vallejo, but hopefully get these earth effects done here around the feet. All right, it's almost done. I added the gun on the side and just glued that in with that piece of paper clip that I drilled into there, so that'll hold. The feet are looking muddy. When that stuff dries, the brown splatter product from Vallejo, it leaves a little thickness, which I think is good if you want really good mud-looking texture. It is glossy, so I think I'm going to go and take a trip to the airbrush room and just give the whole thing a matte coat. Very light matte coat. Maybe go a little heavier on the feet than the rest of it. I'm pretty happy with the finish on most of it. But it does give a very muddy look. I would say that it would be, if you're going to use that, it would be a good idea to get more than just the one color, so you can have a choice of colors there. But I went around and, like you can see, this stain here that I added stains like that across the model, just in various places. To this one, I was actually imagining down the side here, I was actually imagining being a coffee stain, believe it or not. But just, added in some rust and just some other stains as I went along the way. Add a little more back there on the engine deck just to keep it looking good and dirty. And I want this to be, well, I wanted it to be, it's pretty much there now. I wanted it to be used and definitely weathered, but I didn't want it to look like it was ready for the junk heap. And I think I've been able to accomplish that. I'm pretty happy with how this has turned out so far. I was having so much trouble with it tipping back. It would just the least little tip, and it would just go right onto its backside. I ended up taking some fishing weights and squishing them together with some poster putty, and I just tucked that down in there. And then, because it's just down in there and it's visible, and the cockpit's kind of dark and hard to see anyway, I think I'm just going to go ahead and glue that on, and we'll just seal up the cockpit. But it sits a lot better now. I can push it back and it'll come back to the upright fairly well. If you go far enough, it'll tip over, but before, if I just even lightly bumped the table, it just went over backwards, which was not ideal. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with how it's turned out so far. Let me get this glued on, give it a matte coat, and then I think we'll be ready to wrap this up. I added on a matte coat and just kind of to flatten everything down. Also put in these antennas here, one on the other side. There's supposed to be one up here on the top, but because I'm hoping to eventually sell this, I did not want to have to try and ship all those antennas, so I thought I'll leave one on just to reduce my risk of the antennas getting caught up in the filling material that I use to pack the box by a third. And I may go in and actually clip this down even a little more, or at least maybe stick a cork over it before I ship it. That sounds funny to say, but anyway, that's what I may do. I really like how this turned out. However, I will say, if you are looking for a fun kit to build, this is not it. It's not hard, but it takes a lot of work to get this thing in shape. It's an older kit. It doesn't fit great. It's not bad, but if you're just thinking, hey, I want to just find a cool kit to build, and you only kind of like the look of this one, I don't know that I would recommend it. If you want to build Jerry like this, or one of its derivatives, then this is the kit. And it won't be too hard, but I'm someone who likes a nice, pleasant, simple build process. I want to get to the painting and the weathering, and anything that kind of slows me down on the way there, it's not my favorite. But I did have a lot of fun painting and weathering it, I will say that, and I like the way it turned out for sure. Now that it's all finished up and I'm looking at it, I do like the decision not to put the little plastic sleeve over this. I like seeing those segments. I added just a little bit of rust tone to it. You really can't see it unless you get right up close, but I like the way that looks. I like the use of these thinner wires, this lead solder along here, just so that everything's not that heavier, thick wire like you see here and up around the guns and a few of the other areas right up here. So that little difference of the cabling, I think, turned out pretty well. I'm happy with my level of chipping. One of the things I wanted to do was not make chipping a major feature of this, because I tend to get chip happy, and I'm pleased with how this came out. Part of me is going, no, there's not enough chipping, but when I look at it, I think it's an appropriate level for what I'm trying to convey with this, that it's a real object and it is in real combat and it is maintained. So the only thing I think I would have, if I could go back and do something at the painting stage that I would change, is maybe on a few of these panels, just do something to suggest that the panel had been painted over or had been switched out from another Jerry, just to give some additional difference in the tone. I've got the one on the other side that's kind of red, but as I'm looking at this, I just wish there was a little more variation in value of the color. So other than that, I'm pleased with how things worked out. I like the mud on the feet. That's a product I really enjoyed using, and I'm going to be getting more of those because they do really sell the effect of mud. So if you haven't ever checked those out, be sure and check those out. Well, thank you so much for being a Patreon supporter. It is a blessing to my family and I am truly grateful. It allows me to do this work and to be able to afford, for example, kits like this. This is a hard-to-find kit. It's not easy to find, and it's not cheap. So it definitely helps us out in more than just modeling ways, because we just wouldn't have the budget for me to do the things that I do at the pace that I do apart from Patreon. So this helps us in so many ways, and I am truly grateful for it. And as I always like to do, I'll leave you with one final thought. In this hobby, if you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Happy day to you, friends. Bye-bye. Hey, thanks for hanging around to the very end. I thought I'd give you a little surprise. It's not much of a surprise, but this is what I'm going to be building next for the patrons. It's from Rocket Models. It's a 1/35th scale kit from their Fist of War series. It's like if World War II would have gone on. I don't know why people get so into that, because that would have been a bad thing. But anyway, it's this walking tank. They've done a series of German ones and I think maybe some Russian ones, but this one is Japanese. It was recently released, and when I saw the design, I thought, yeah, I got to do this one. So it's called an IJA Tactical SPG Kabuto Kai with experimental 12-centimeter gun. I don't know what all that means, but I just know it looks kind of cool. But I'm not going to be doing it in World War II markings. I'm going to do something a little different, a little more sci-fi than this, and I'll give you a clue as to what it's going to be. I'll just leave that right there. Anyway, thanks for sticking around, and this will be the next Patreon exclusive video you'll see. So thank you very much.